My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 74 years old, and at my own family's Thanksgiving dinner, I was the only one left without a gift. When my daughter-in-law smirked and said they'd forgotten mine, I reached into my purse and pulled out a document that wiped the smiles off their faces for good. It's a long story, one that's taken years to unfold, and I'd be grateful to share it with you. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Let me know in the comments what country you're in and what time it is there. It warms my heart to know we can connect from all over the world. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. It all began with a promise 5 years ago. My husband, Frank, had been gone for just over a year, and the silence in our little house near Portland, Maine was still a physical weight. Frank had been a planner, a man who believed in taking care of his family even after he was gone. He'd left behind a respectable life insurance policy, not a fortune, but enough to ensure I wouldn't have to worry. Enough for me to live out my days in peace. But peace was the last thing I was getting. My only son, Kevin, and his wife, Vanessa, were visiting. They sat on the floral sofa Frank and I had picked out together, looking out of place in their sharp modern clothes. Vanessa was talking about Kevin's job, his ambitions. He worked in middle management in a tech firm, and according to her, he was on the cusp of greatness. "He just needs a little push, Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as honey. "A little seed capital. He has this incredible idea for a startup, a consulting business. It's a sure thing, but you know how it is. The banks, they want so much collateral." Kevin looked at his hands, a habit he'd had since he was a boy when he was nervous. "It's a good idea, Mom. It would really set us up for the future, for the kids' college fund, everything." My heart ached for him, for the pressure I saw on his face. He was my boy. I remembered teaching him how to ride a bike on this very street. I remembered the day he left for college, tears in his eyes. All I ever wanted was for him to be happy and secure. Frank's money, our money, was meant for that. It was an inheritance not just for me, but for the future of the family he'd built. "Of course," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Of course I'll help. Your father would have wanted that." The next day, I went to the bank and withdrew $25,000. It felt like a sacred act, passing on Frank's legacy. I handed the cashier's check to Kevin. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment he felt like my little boy again. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "This will change everything." Vanessa kissed my cheek. "You won't regret this, Margaret. This is an investment in your family." For a few months, I heard promising updates. They were meeting with potential clients, building a website, finalizing the business plan. I felt a quiet pride picturing Kevin as a successful CEO, a captain of his own destiny. I was a part of that. I had helped. The truth came out, as it always does, not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a casual, thoughtless conversation. I was at a distant cousin's barbecue. Another cousin, Sarah, came up to me, bubbly and excited. "Margaret, I saw Kevin and Vanessa the other day. That new SUV they have is a dream. A fully loaded Lincoln Navigator." And she was telling me all about their trip to Italy. Tuscany, can you imagine? They must be doing so well. I felt the hamburger I was eating turn to ash in my mouth. A Lincoln Navigator? Italy? My mind raced. The startup? The consulting business? It didn't add up. I kept a polite smile on my face, but a cold dread seeped into my bones. I waited a week, my stomach in knots, before I called. I tried to keep my tone light, casual. "Kevin, honey, how's the business coming along? I was just curious." He was quiet for a moment too long. Then Vanessa's voice cut in on the speakerphone, bright and sharp. "Oh, it's going great, Margaret. We realized the best way to attract high-end clients was to project an image of success. The car, the travel, it's all part of the marketing strategy. You have to spend money to make money. It's an investment in our brand. An investment in their brand. Not the business, not the college fund. My $25,000 Frank's legacy had been turned into a luxury car and a European vacation? I see, I said, and my voice was flat. The warmth was gone. I thought it was for a business. It is, Vanessa insisted, her cheerfulness feeling like a slap. This is how business is done now. Don't you worry your head about it. We have it all under control. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. It wasn't the money. I would have given them the money for a car if they had just asked, if they had been honest. It was the lie. It was the ease with which they took my trust, my hope, and twisted it into something for their own selfish pleasure. They hadn't just spent my money. They had spent a piece of my faith in them. I sat in Frank's armchair, the house silent around me, and I understood for the first time that I was truly alone. I had made a promise to help my family, but they had broken a much deeper one. They had broken the promise of trust. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that this was only the beginning. The 3 years that followed were a slow, quiet erosion. The phone calls became less frequent. Visits dwindled to obligatory drop-ins on major holidays. Always rushed, always ending with Vanessa looking at her watch. They were building their life, their brand, and it became clear that a quiet, aging mother in a modest house didn't fit the image. I tried in the beginning. I'd call and leave voicemails that went unreturned for days. I'd suggest dinner, and they'd be swamped. I offered to babysit my grandchildren, Lisa and her younger brother Tom, but Vanessa would always have an excuse. Oh, they have soccer practice, then a coding camp. It's just too chaotic, Margaret. You wouldn't enjoy it. The message was clear. I was an inconvenience, an obligation. Each unanswered call, each canceled plan was a small cut. I was being gently, politely, but firmly pushed to the margins of their lives. Kevin, my son, was a ghost in these interactions. He was always there, on the other end of the line or in the room, but he was silent. He let Vanessa do the talking, his face a mask of weary neutrality. I think his silence hurt more than her excuses. It was the silence of a man who had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that this was only the beginning. The 3 years that followed were a slow, quiet erosion. The phone calls became less frequent. Visits dwindled to obligatory drop-ins on major holidays. Always rushed, always ending with Vanessa looking at her watch. They were building their life, their brand, and it became clear that a quiet, aging mother in a modest house didn't fit the image. I woke up early that day. The sun was streaming through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I put on my favorite blue dress, the one Frank always said matched my eyes. I made a fresh pot of coffee and sat by the phone, waiting. Morning turned into afternoon. I tidied the house, rearranged the bookshelf, watched the cars go by. Each time the phone was silent, the knot in my stomach tightened. I told myself they were busy. Kevin had an important job. Vanessa was juggling the kids. They'd call in the evening. 6 p.m. arrived. The sky outside began to darken. The local news started on the television, the familiar theme song sounding like a funeral dirge. No call, no text, nothing. My neighbor, Carol,
a woman I'd known for 30 years, called around 7. "Happy birthday, Margaret," she chirped. "I hope Kevin and the family are spoiling you rotten." I forced a laugh. "Oh, you know how busy they are, Carol. We'll celebrate this weekend." It was a lie, and we both knew it. The pity in her voice was almost worse than the silence from my own family. At 8 p.m., my cell phone finally buzzed. My heart leapt. I fumbled to pick it up, my hands shaking. It was a text message. From Lisa, my granddaughter, who was 17 at the time. The message read, "HYKBDA, Grandma love you." That was it. No punctuation, no capital letters, the kind of message you send without thinking while watching TV or talking to your friends, a perfunctory, thoughtless gesture. And yet, it was the only acknowledgement I received from my family that day. It was a crumb, and I was expected to be grateful for it. I put the phone down, I walked to the kitchen, and looked at the single cupcake I had bought for myself at the grocery store, a small, sad thing with a lonely-looking swirl of pink frosting. I didn't light the candle. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The years of small cuts had finally bled me dry of hope. What I felt, instead, was a profound, chilling clarity. It wasn't that they were busy. It wasn't that they were thoughtless. It was that I no longer mattered. I was a box to be ticked, an obligation so minor that it could be forgotten entirely without consequence. I was an item on a to-do list that they never got around to. That night, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud crack, but a quiet, final click, like a lock settling into place. I had spent years waiting by the phone, waiting for an invitation, waiting for a sliver of their attention. I had been waiting for them to give me a place in their lives. And as I sat there in the deepening dark, I made a decision. I was done waiting. If they wouldn't give me a place, I would build one for myself. A place they couldn't touch, couldn't ignore, couldn't forget. My life was not going to be defined by their neglect. It was time for a new chapter. And this time, I would be the only one holding the pen. The morning after my 72nd birthday felt different. The silence in the house wasn't lonely anymore. It was an opportunity. It was a blank canvas. For the first time in a long time, my days weren't structured around waiting for a phone call that would never come. They were mine. I'd always been comfortable with computers, more so than most women my age. Frank had been an early adopter, and he'd taught me the basics years ago. I decided that was where I would start. My old desktop was slow, so I took a piece of the inheritance money, the money I had so carefully guarded, and I bought myself a new laptop, a sleek silver machine with a backlit keyboard. It felt powerful in my hands. It felt like a tool. My first few weeks were a deep dive into a world that felt both foreign and exhilarating. I spent hours on YouTube, a spiral notebook open beside me, scribbling down terms I didn't understand. SEO, landing pages, email funnels, affiliate marketing. It was like learning a new language. But I was a patient student. I paused, rewound, and took meticulous notes. I wasn't just passing the time, I was studying. I had always enjoyed writing. In my youth, I'd kept journals, and I'd always been the one to write the long, newsy Christmas letters for the family. I decided to start a blog, a place to put my thoughts. I needed a name, something that captured this feeling of starting over, not from scratch, but with the wisdom of a life already lived. One afternoon, while sweeping the kitchen floor, it hit me. New chapter stories. It felt right. I wrote my first post titled, "The Other Side of 70, What No One Tells You." I wrote about the invisibility that comes with age, the feeling of being a ghost in your own life. I wrote about the unexpected freedom that comes when you stop trying to please everyone. I wrote from the heart with a raw honesty I hadn't allowed myself in years. I hit publish with a trembling finger, not expecting anyone to read it. For a week, it got 12 views, then 20. I didn't care. It was enough that it was out there, that my words existed outside of my own head. Then one morning I saw a comment. It was from a woman named Susan in Ohio. She wrote, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Reading your words felt like having a cup of tea with a friend I've known my whole life. You have no idea how much I needed this today." I stared at that comment for 10 minutes. I read it over and over. A cup of tea with a friend. Someone had heard me. More than that, someone had understood. That single comment was the spark that lit the fire. I started writing every day. I wrote about navigating grief without losing yourself. I wrote about the quiet joy of a solitary morning. I wrote about budgeting on a fixed income, sharing the thrifty tips my own mother had taught me. My audience grew slowly, then all at once. 10 readers became 100. 100 became 1,000. They were women like me, from all over the country. Women who had been overlooked, who had raised families and buried husbands, who were standing at the threshold of a new, uncertain chapter and looking for a guide. I realized I wasn't just writing a blog, I was building a community. My research had taught me that a blog could be a business. I started small. Using a simple design tool called Canva, I created printable journals, a grief and gratitude journal, a daily intentions planner. Simple, beautiful, useful things that I would have wanted myself. I listed them on an Etsy shop linked to my blog. The first sale came in, $4.99. I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with the money. It was validation. Someone found value in what I had created. Then I wrote my first ebook. It was short, only 40 pages. I called it After the Funeral, a practical guide to finding yourself again. I poured all my hard-won wisdom into it, all the things I wish someone had told me after Frank died. I priced it at $7.99, thinking a few people might buy it.
The book took off. A reader shared it in a large online support group for widows. Suddenly, I was getting sales from California, Texas, Florida, even Canada and the UK. That first month, the ebook made over $2,000. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the sales dashboard on my laptop screen. The numbers seemed unreal, but the feeling was profoundly real. It was a feeling of accomplishment, of worth, that was entirely my own. No one had given it to me. No one could take it away. I had built this, brick by brick, word by word, in the quiet hours of my new life. It was my secret, my triumph, and it was just the beginning. The first taste of real success was intoxicating, but it also made me cautious. My experience with Kevin and Vanessa, the sting of that broken promise over the $25,000, had taught me a valuable lesson about money and family. It changes things. It makes people see you differently. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if they knew about this burgeoning business, they wouldn't see it as my accomplishment. They would see it as a resource. So I made a conscious decision to build a fortress around my new life, a fortress of secrecy and legal protection. My first call was to a man named Arthur Miller. He was a lawyer in town, a bit younger than me, with a reputation for being sharp, discreet, and no nonsense. I'd met him once at a Rotary Club dinner with Frank years ago. I sat in his quiet, wood-paneled office, my hands folded in my lap, and I laid out the situation. I told him about the blog, the Etsy shop, the ebook sales. I didn't tell him the family drama, just that I was starting a new venture and wanted to do it right. I want to form an LLC, I said, using a term I'd learned from a YouTube video. And I want you to be my registered agent. All official correspondence should come to your office. I want my home address kept completely separate from the business. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. That's a smart move, Margaret. Most people in the early stages don't think that far ahead. I'm 72, Arthur, I replied with a small smile. I don't have time to learn things the hard way anymore. I want this to be my fortress. I need to know it's secure. He nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. Consider it done. Leaving his office that day, I felt a new sense of power. This wasn't a hobby anymore. This was Second Wind Collective LLC. It was real, it was mine, and it was protected. With the legal structure in place, I poured my energy into growth. I learned about email marketing and started a weekly newsletter. I wrestled with the idea of a paid subscription. Would anyone actually pay to read my thoughts every week? My biggest fear wasn't failure. It was the potential judgment from my family if they ever found out and it didn't work. That fear was what kept my secret so tightly guarded. I decided to call the newsletter the Dignity Letter. It felt right. It was about reclaiming the dignity that society and sometimes even our own families tries to strip away from women as they age. I offered it for $5 a month. The first month, 62 people signed up. The next, over 150. By the end of the first year, I had nearly 1,000 subscribers. They didn't just subscribe, they wrote back. They told me my letters were the highlight of their week. They told me I gave them courage. I was no longer just a blogger. I was a confidant, a mentor, a leader of a quiet, powerful tribe of women who refused to be invisible. The income streams began to multiply. I created more digital products. I launched a short online course about journaling for mental clarity. I learned about affiliate promotions, recommending products I genuinely used and loved, and earning a small commission. The numbers on my business bank account dashboard, which I checked every morning with my coffee, began to climb at a dizzying rate. $5,000 a month, then $10,000 a month. One crisp autumn evening, nearly 2 years into my journey, I logged in and saw the final tally for the third quarter. After expenses, after setting aside money for taxes, the net profit for the last 3 months was a little over $38,000. I just stared at the screen. It was more money than Frank and I used to make in a year from his mechanic shop. I had earned this from my kitchen table, in my pajamas, with a laptop and an internet connection. I felt a wave of dizziness, a mixture of shock and elation. My first instinct was to pick up the phone and call Kevin. "Look, son, look what your old mom did." I wanted his praise. I wanted him to be proud of me. But then the memory of Vanessa's voice echoed in my mind. It's an investment in our brand. The impulse died. The pride was still there, but it was mine alone. Sharing it with them would be like inviting a fox into the henhouse. They wouldn't celebrate my success. They would strategize how to spend it. They had lost the right to be a part of this. My secrecy wasn't born of shame. It was a boundary born of experience. My success was my own, and my fortress was secure. And I had a feeling I was going to need it. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. I didn't recognize the number at first. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello?" "Margaret, it's Vanessa." Her voice was so sweet it could give you a toothache. It was a voice I hadn't heard in months, not since a brief, awkward call for my last birthday, where she'd passed the phone to the kids for a mumbled happy birthday before hanging up. "Hello, Vanessa," I said, my own voice neutral.
I know this is last minute, she began, a practiced rush in her words. But Kevin and I were talking, and we absolutely insist you come to our place for Thanksgiving this year. It's been too long. The kids miss you terribly. I was silent. In the background, I could hear her shushing one of the kids. The kids miss me? Lisa was in her first year of college, and Tom was glued to his video games. The last time I saw him, he hadn't looked up from his screen once. That's unexpected, I said finally. I know, we've just been so terrible about keeping in touch. Kevin has been under so much pressure at work, you know how it is, but we're turning over a new leaf. Family first. Please say you'll come. My mind, now trained to analyze and strategize, was racing. Why now? After 2 years of near-total silence, why this sudden, desperate-sounding invitation? It didn't feel like an olive branch. It felt like a calculation. With the knowledge of my own success tucked away like a secret weapon, I had a different perspective. I wasn't a lonely old woman anymore. I was the CEO of my own life, and I knew a bad business proposal when I heard one. But I was also curious. All right, Vanessa, I said slowly. I'll come. Wonderful, she gushed. We can't wait to see you. After we hung up, I sat for a long time staring out the window. I had a strong feeling this wasn't about turkey and stuffing. This was a reconnaissance mission, and I needed to be prepared.
What I didn't know then was just how right I was. In their gleaming, oversized house 20 miles away, a very different conversation had taken place an hour earlier. Kevin was staring at a pile of bills on their granite kitchen island, his face pale. "It's not good, Van," he said, his voice low. "The severance pay from the job is almost gone. I thought I'd had found something by now, but after they passed me over for that last promotion and then laid me off, my confidence is shot. The mortgage is due, Lisa's college fund needs a deposit, and my credit card is maxed out." He had been laid off 2 months ago and hadn't told me. He'd lost the promotion he'd been banking on before that. The pressure at work, Vanessa mentioned, was the pressure of having no work at all. Vanessa, ever the strategist, barely looked up from her phone where she was scrolling through pictures of designer handbags. "Stop panicking, Kevin. It's unattractive. I have a plan." "What plan?" "Your mother," she said simply. Kevin flinched. "What about her? We can't ask her for more money. Not after, you know." The ghost of the $25,000 still hung between them. "Don't be an idiot," Vanessa snapped, finally looking at him. "We're not going to ask her for money. That's what poor people do. We're going to manage her money. She's getting older. She's all alone in that big house. She probably has all of your father's inheritance just sitting in a bank account, doing nothing. It's not safe. She needs her family to look after her." Kevin looked confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we invite her for Thanksgiving. We lay on the charm, we talk about how worried we are about her, we convince her to sell that old house and move in with us. We can set her up in the guest room. We'll help her set up a joint account for her safety, to pay her bills and make sure she's not getting scammed. It's the responsible thing to do as her loving son." The cold, cynical brilliance of it was all Vanessa. It wasn't just a grab for cash. It was a plan for total financial control wrapped in the guise of love and concern. Kevin ran a hand through his thinning hair. A flicker of something, maybe shame, crossed his face. "I don't know, Van. It feels wrong." "What's wrong," she said, her voice like ice, "is having our cars repossessed. What's wrong is telling Lisa she can't go back to college next semester. Your mother has more than she needs. We're her only family. It's our duty. Now stop whining and let me call her. Try to sound happy when I put you on." And so the invitation was extended. It wasn't about turning over a new leaf, it was about turning over my bank account. They saw me as their salvation, their easy way out. They thought they were setting a trap for a lonely, clueless old woman. They had no idea they were walking into one of their own. Thanksgiving Day arrived, crisp and cold. I drove to their house, my old, reliable sedan feeling small and out of place, parked next to their gleaming, oversized SUVs in the driveway. I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. I wore a simple black sweater and gray slacks, my only jewelry the thin gold wedding band Frank had placed on my finger over 50 years ago. I carried a small handbag and a pumpkin pie I'd baked from scratch, a relic of a tradition they had long since abandoned. Vanessa opened the door, her smile a perfect bright veneer. "Margaret, you made it!" She gave me a brittle air kiss of a hug that smelled of expensive perfume. The house was immaculate, decorated like a magazine spread in shades of gray and white. A massive television was playing a football game on mute over a sleek modern fireplace. The kids were on the sofa, Tom engrossed in a game on his tablet, Lisa scrolling through her phone. They mumbled, "Hi, Grandma," without looking up. Kevin gave me a quick one-armed hug, his eyes darting around nervously. "Glad you could make it, Mom." The whole scene felt staged, a performance for an audience of one. Dinner was a tense affair. Vanessa and Kevin kept the conversation flowing with superficial chatter about their friends' promotions and neighbors' kitchen renovations. They asked me nothing about my life, which was exactly what I expected. I ate my food, sipped my water, and played my part, the quiet, slightly out of touch matriarch. After the meal, Vanessa clapped her hands together with forced enthusiasm. Time for presents! This was new. They hadn't done Thanksgiving presents before. It was clearly part of the show, a demonstration of their supposed generosity. She and Kevin started passing out beautifully wrapped boxes. A new gaming headset for Tom, a designer scarf for Lisa, a new set of golf clubs for Kevin from Vanessa, a ridiculously expensive-looking handbag for Vanessa from Kevin. Each gift was met with oohs and ahs. I sat on the armchair, a polite smile fixed on my face, watching the wrapping paper pile up on the floor. I was the only one whose name wasn't called. When the last gift was opened, there was an awkward silence. Vanessa looked around as if suddenly noticing. She gave a little, theatrical laugh. "Oh, goodness! Margaret, I am so sorry. In all the holiday rush, I completely forgot to get you something. We'll have to make it up to you at Christmas." Kevin cleared his throat and looked down at his shoes. Lisa glanced at me, a flicker of embarrassment in her eyes. Tom, oblivious, was already trying on his new headset. This was the moment. This was the opening they had created for me. I didn't get angry. I didn't act hurt. I simply gave a calm, reassuring smile. "Oh, don't you worry about it at all. It's the thought that counts." I let the moment hang in the air for a beat. Then, as Vanessa started to look relieved, I continued. "And besides," I said, my voice still light, "I've been doing a little bit of my own shopping lately." This got their attention. All eyes turned to me. Vanessa leaned forward, her concerned mask slipping perfectly into place. "Shopping? Margaret, you have to be careful. You're on a fixed income. We've been so worried about you, living all alone in that big house. We've actually been talking." Kevin jumped in right on cue. "Yeah, Mom, we think it might be time for you to consider selling the house. You can move in with us. We'd take care of everything, help you manage your finances, make sure you're safe." This was the bait, the beautifully crafted trap designed to make me feel old, incompetent, and dependent. They thought they were cornering a frightened mouse. I looked at my son, at the woman who had replaced his spine with a wishbone, and I felt a profound sense of pity for them.
I reached into my handbag, and my fingers closed around the cool, smooth metal. I pulled out a single, shiny key attached to a simple leather fob. I placed it gently on the polished surface of the coffee table. "That's so thoughtful of you both," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "But I won't be needing the guest room. You see, I just closed on a 2-bedroom condo downtown last week. I'm moving in after the holidays."
The silence that followed the appearance of the key was thick enough to cut with a knife. The football game on the television played on, a silent, flickering backdrop to the frozen tableau in the living room. Kevin stared at the key as if it were a venomous snake. Vanessa's perfectly applied smile had vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. "A condo?" she finally managed to say, her voice a full octave higher than usual. "Downtown? Margaret, what are you talking about? Those places are incredibly expensive. How could you possibly afford that?" Her question hung in the air, loaded with a dozen unspoken accusations. "You're an old woman. You're irresponsible. You've spent all of Frank's money." It was exactly the reaction I had anticipated. They weren't happy for me. They were horrified. My independent action had just thrown a massive wrench into their cynical plans. I let her panic build for a moment before I answered. "Oh, you don't need to worry about me, dear," I said, patting her hand in a parody of reassurance. "I have my own income now." Kevin looked up, his face a mask of disbelief. "Income? Mom, what are you talking about? Your Social Security?" This was the next step in my calculated reveal. I was feeding them information piece by piece, letting them make their own flawed assumptions, letting them dig their own hole a little deeper. "No, not just that," I said, with a dismissive little wave of my hand. "I started a little something online a while back. A blog, just a hobby to keep my mind busy." A look of immense relief washed over Vanessa's face. A blog, a cute little hobby for a lonely old woman. This was something she could understand, something she could easily dismiss. She let out a condescending little laugh. "Oh, a blog. How sweet. That's wonderful, Margaret. It's so important to have hobbies." She turned to Kevin, a conspiratorial glance passing between them. The message was clear. She's lost her mind. She's spending her savings on a condo because of some imaginary income from a silly blog. Their arrogance was my greatest ally. They were so convinced of my incompetence that they couldn't see the truth, even as it was staring them in the face. They were doubling down on their plan. "Well, that just proves our point, doesn't it?" Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's wonderful you have a hobby, but it doesn't change the fact that you need someone to look after your real finances. A condo is a huge responsibility." "She's right, Mom," Kevin chimed in, finding his voice now that he felt he was back on solid ground. "We can't let you put yourself in a precarious position. We need to sit down and look at your accounts, make a proper budget for you." They had walked right into it. They had voiced their intentions out loud in front of their own children. They weren't offering help. They were demanding control. The time for games was over. "A budget," I repeated thoughtfully. I nodded slowly. That's not a bad idea." I reached into my handbag again. This time, I pulled out a neatly folded sheaf of papers. It was a 4-page summary I had printed from my business accounting software that morning. I unfolded it and placed it on the coffee table on top of the key. I said, my voice no longer light or casual. It was quiet, but it carried the weight of the last 2 years of hard work. "You're right," I said. "We should look at the numbers." I tapped the top page with my finger. "This is the Q3 P&L statement for my company, Second Wind Collective, LLC. I watched their eyes scan the document. I saw the moment their brains registered the name. Then I saw the moment their eyes hit the bottom line. "My little hobby," I continued, my voice steady and clear, currently has over 85,000 monthly readers. The paid newsletter, the Dignity Letter, has several thousand subscribers. The Etsy store sells, on average, over 100 digital products a week. I paused, letting the information sink in. Kevin was ashen. Vanessa's mouth was opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. Then I delivered the final blow. So, to your point about my finances, I said, looking directly at Vanessa, I don't think I'll be needing your help with a budget. My net income for the last quarter, after all expenses and taxes, was just over $42,000. The phrase $42,000 echoed in the silent room. It was an impossible number, a figure that didn't compute with their image of me as a helpless, lonely old woman living off a widow's pension. Kevin sank back into the sofa cushions as if the air had been punched out of him. He picked up the document, his hands trembling slightly, and stared at the numbers as if they were written in a foreign language. This can't be real," he said. "Oh, it's very real, honey," I said calmly. Vanessa stood frozen, her face a bizarre collage of shock, envy, and raw, naked greed. The mask was gone. All that was left was the calculating mind beneath, frantically trying to re-strategize to find a new angle. But the most important transformation in the room wasn't happening to them. It was happening to my granddaughter. Lisa, who had been watching this entire exchange with wide, unblinking eyes, slowly stood up. She had been a quiet observer, a typical teenager, seemingly lost in her own world, but in that moment she looked like she had woken up from a long dream. She looked at her parents, at their stunned, greedy faces, and then she looked at me, her grandmother, who she had just witnessed perform an act of incredible power and dignity. "Grandma," she said, her voice filled with a new, profound respect. She took a step towards me, away from her parents. That's amazing." And then, turning to her parents, her voice took on a sharp edge I had never heard from her before. "You were going to try and take her money, weren't you? That's what this was all about. That's why you invited her." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Vanessa flinched as if struck. "Lisa, don't be ridiculous. We were just worried about your grandmother." "No, you weren't," Lisa shot back, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disillusionment. "You never call her. You forgot her last birthday. You didn't even get her a Thanksgiving gift. You were embarrassed by her until you saw that piece of paper." The truth, spoken so plainly by their own daughter, was devastating. Kevin couldn't even look at her. He just stared at his hands, the very picture of shame. But Vanessa was a fighter. Her shock was already morphing into a new kind of enthusiasm. Her mind had processed the new reality and found an opportunity. She rushed over and sat on the arm of my chair, her demeanor shifting from predator to partner in the blink of an eye. "Kevin," she called out, snapping her fingers, "stop moping! This is fantastic news! Think of the potential!"
She grabbed my arm. "Margaret, we have to help you. This is too big for you to handle on your own. With my marketing savvy and Kevin's business background, we could turn this into a real empire. We could franchise, launch a product line, get you on television. Think of it as a family partnership. We can help you scale it." Kevin looked up, a pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes. He saw a lifeline. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a desperate, unemployed man looking at a winning lottery ticket. "She's right, Mom," he said, his voice earnest. "We could really take this to the next level. For the family." For the family. The same words they had used when they took my $25,000. I looked at their faces, so full of sudden, desperate interest. They weren't proud of me. They weren't happy for my success. They were just dazzled by the dollar signs. They didn't see me, Margaret. They saw an asset, a brand, an opportunity. They had shown me their true colors more vividly than ever before, and now it was my turn to show them mine. I gently removed Vanessa's hand from my arm. I looked at her, then at my son, and I took a slow, deliberate sip of the cold tea that sat on the end table beside me. The room was quiet again, but this time it was a tense, expectant silence. They were waiting for my answer, certain I would be swayed by their brilliant, last-ditch proposal. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the room with the force of a davil. Vanessa blinked. "No? What do you mean no? Margaret, this is a huge opportunity. We're trying to help you." "No, thank you," I clarified, my voice remaining perfectly even. "I'm not interested in a partnership." Kevin frowned, the look of a confused child on his face. "But why not? We're family. We just want to be involved." I leaned back in my armchair and folded my hands in my lap. It was time for the final lesson. Not a lesson in business, but a lesson in consequences. "Let me explain something to you both," I began, my gaze sweeping from Kevin to Vanessa. "For the last 5 years, I have tried to be involved in your lives. I called, I baked pies, I offered to babysit, I gave you money that I thought was for your future, only to find out it was for your vanity." Kevin flinched and looked away. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "In return, I was treated like a chore, like an old piece of furniture you dust off for the holidays. You slowly, deliberately, and quietly iced me out of your lives. You let my birthdays pass by unnoticed. You sat here today and watched me be the only person without a gift, and your first reaction was a condescending little joke. I was treated like an obligation you had to manage, not a mother you loved. And I accepted that. I moved on. I built something for myself, by myself, in the silence you created for me." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "And now," I said, my voice dropping slightly, "now that you see this," I gestured to the financial report still sitting on the table, "now that you see dollar signs, you suddenly want to be involved. You suddenly see potential. You aren't proud of me. You're prospecting." "That's not family," I stated, the truth of it sharp and clean. "That's business, and my company is not open to new partners, especially not partners who only show up when they smell success." No one spoke. The air was thick with unspoken arguments they knew they couldn't win. I stood up then, the movement slow and deliberate. I was not storming out in a fit of anger. I was simply concluding a meeting that was over. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. "I'm not angry," I said, and it was the honest truth. The anger had burned out long ago, leaving behind something much stronger, clarity. What I have built is mine. It's personal. It grew out of the pain you didn't ask about and the loneliness you didn't notice. You don't get to own a piece of that now." I looked at Lisa, who was standing near the doorway, her eyes shining with tears, not of sadness, but of pride. I gave her a small, warm smile. Then I looked back at my son and his wife. "I hope you both find what you're looking for," I said softly, "but it's not here. It's not with me." I picked up the condo key from the table and slipped it into my handbag. I left the pie on the counter. I didn't need it anymore. Without another word, I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the crisp November air. I didn't look back. I was walking away from the ruins of the family I thought I had and toward the life I had built with my own 2 hands. I was free. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine and the sound of the tires on the pavement. There was no turmoil in my chest, no righteous anger, no lingering sadness. There was only a profound, unshakable peace. The peace of a battle fought and won, not with shouting, but with quiet truth. "Oh, we're just wonderful, but so busy," she said, a manufactured breathlessness in her voice. "Which is why I'm calling. I know this is terribly last minute, and you must think we're just awful, but Kevin and I were talking, and we absolutely insist that you come to our house for Thanksgiving this year. It's just been far too long. The kids ask about you all the time." The lie was so blatant it was almost artistic. "The kids ask about you?" My granddaughter Lisa was away at college, navigating her own new world. My grandson Tom, the last time I'd seen him, had communicated entirely in grunts from behind an iPad screen. The only thing they missed was the check I used to put in their birthday cards. I was silent for a moment, letting her empty words hang in the air. My mind, now accustomed to seeing patterns and looking for motives, was running a dozen scenarios. This wasn't a social call. This was an overture. But to what? I felt like a detective who had just been handed a very intriguing, if suspicious case. "All right, Vanessa," I said, my voice giving nothing away. "That sounds lovely. I'll be there." "Wonderful!" The relief in her voice was palpable. "We absolutely cannot wait to see you."
As I hung up the phone, the dreary gray outside seemed to have seeped into the room. I walked over to my desk and looked at the business plan I had been sketching out for the next quarter. I was a different woman now than I had been 5 years ago. I was no longer a grieving widow hoping for a lifeline of affection. I was the CEO of Second Wind Collective, LLC, and I knew a hostile takeover attempt when I heard one. This invitation wasn't about family. It was a reconnaissance mission. And 20 miles away, in a house that was far too big for their budget, the architects of that mission were confirming their strategy. I learned the true nature of it much later, pieced together from a guilty confession from Kevin, but at that moment, the scene was playing out in their cold, white kitchen. Kevin was staring at a stack of letters on their granite island, letters with red "past due" stamps on them. His shoulders were slumped in defeat. "It's a disaster, Van," he said, his voice a hollow whisper. "The severance package is almost gone. I've been networking, sending out resumes, nothing. After they passed me over for that last promotion, my confidence just cratered. And getting laid off right after, I feel like a failure." He had lost his job 2 months earlier, a fact he had carefully concealed from me and everyone else he could. The mortgage company called again. "Lisa's spring tuition deposit is due in January. We can't touch her college fund for that. It's barely enough as it is. My credit cards are so maxed out they're practically melting." Vanessa, who was applying a fresh coat of blood-red nail polish, didn't even look up. "Stop being so dramatic, Kevin. Panic is a bad look. I told you I have a plan." "What plan? Another investment?" The bitterness in his voice was sharp. The ghost of my $25,000 was a frequent visitor in their arguments. She finally looked at him, her eyes hard. "My plan is your mother." Kevin visibly recoiled. "No, absolutely not. We can't ask her for money. Not again." "How said anything about asking?" Vanessa replied, her voice dropping into a low, conspiratorial tone. "Asking is messy. It's beneath us. We're going to help her. Think about it. She's getting older, rattling around in that big house all by herself. It's not safe. She has all of your father's inheritance, probably just sitting in some low-interest savings account. A woman her age is a prime target for scammers. She needs her family to protect her assets." Kevin stared at her, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about?" "When I'm talking about is a long-term solution," Vanessa explained, her patience thin. "We invite her for Thanksgiving, we shower her with affection, we express our deep,
deep concern for her well-being. We convince her it's time to sell that dreary old house and move in with us. We'll be the perfect doting family. We'll set her up in the guest room, and to make things easier for her, we'll help her consolidate her accounts into a joint one with you. For her protection, of course, so we can pay her bills, manage her portfolio, make sure she's taken care of. It was a breathtakingly cynical plot. Not a simple cash grab, but a complete hostile takeover of her life and finances, all under the benevolent guise of elder care. A flicker of the boy I raised appeared in Kevin's eyes. Van, that feels like stealing. Vanessa stood up and walked over to him, placing her freshly painted nails on his chest. Her voice was a velvet threat. You know what feels like stealing, Kevin. The bank stealing this house, the college stealing Lisa's future, the world stealing your self-respect. Your mother has more than she needs. We are her family. This isn't stealing. It's a reallocation of resources. It's our duty. Now I am going to call her, and when I put you on the phone, you are going to sound like the happiest, most loving son on the face of this earth. Understood? When I got home, I put the kettle on and logged onto my computer. My readers were waiting. I opened a blank document and began to write that week's post for New Chapter Stories. I titled it, The Gift You Give Yourself. I didn't mention my family, or the condo, or the money. I wrote about the importance of self-reliance, of finding your worth within yourself, not in the approval of others. I wrote about building a life so full and satisfying that you become your own source of joy. I hit publish and watched the comments begin to roll in, a chorus of women from all over the world saying, "Thank you. I needed to hear this." That Thanksgiving was a turning point. It was the end of one story and the beginning of another. A year has passed since that day. I sold the old house, the place filled with the ghosts of who we used to be, and moved into my beautiful new condo downtown. It's filled with light and books and the smell of freshly brewed tea. My days are full and rich.
She's in her second year of college now, majoring in business and marketing. She is my first and only intern. She spends her weekends with me, and I teach her everything I know. She helps me manage my social media, writes brilliant copy for my product descriptions, and is currently helping me plan my first ever subscriber retreat to be held here in Maine next summer. She uses the salary I pay her to fund her own college expenses, proud to be earning her own way. Sometimes she'll look up from her laptop at my kitchen table, which has become our boardroom, and say, "You really built all this from nothing, Grandma." And I'll smile and say, "Not from nothing, sweetheart. I built it from everything I had left." As for Kevin and Vanessa, I hear about them occasionally through the family grapevine. They managed to avoid bankruptcy, but just barely. Kevin eventually found another lower-paying job. They sold the big house and the fancy SUV and moved into a smaller rental. I don't know if they ever understood the real lesson of that day. I suspect Vanessa only regrets that she didn't discover my success sooner. And Kevin lives with a quiet, gnawing shame he may never admit. I hold no ill will towards them. They are simply characters in a chapter of my life that is now closed. I've learned that the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to count you out is to change the way you keep score. They can take your time, they can take your money, they can try to take your dignity, but they can't take your worth unless you hand it to them. My name is Margaret Wilson, and I learned to stop waiting for an invitation to a party I no longer wanted to attend. Instead, I decided to build my own room. A beautiful, light-filled room, and leave the door wide open for anyone else who was tired of waiting in the cold. They tried to write me out of their story, so I wrote a new one for myself. And I want to ask you, the person listening to my voice right now, a question. Has you ever felt pushed to the side, your value overlooked, your sacrifices taken for granted? What strength did you find in that silence? What new chapter did you write for yourself? Please, share your story or even just a piece of it in the comments below. Your story matters. Let's build our own community, right here, right now.